Good evening and welcome to MHPA 2263, Quality Management in Education. I'm Doria, the instructor for this class. So our class today will feature Datuk Dr. Habibah Abdul Rahim, formerly Director General of Education Malaysia. She's currently the Adjunct Professor at Universiti Teknologi Malaysia, specifically School of Education, Faculty of Social Science and Humanities. Datuk Habibah is also a Senior Fellow at Institut Masa Depan Negara. This is a national think tank responsible for Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, the latest document that will chart the course of Malaysia's development for the next 10 years. So, Datuk Habibah, would you like us to call you Datuk, Dr. Habibah, Datuk Habibah, Dr. Habibah?
Whichever is comfortable to you, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So as I mentioned just now, class, she's the former Director General. So I've shared your Padlet from the first week of the lecture with her. So she should be able to help you to demystify certain queries, questions, skepticism that you have on quality management. Datuk Habibah has more than 34 years of service before retiring quite recently in April 2021. She started off as a secondary school teacher. So to everyone here, you can be someone in the ministry. Among the posts that Datuk Habibah has held include head of the Delivery Management Office for Education National Key Economic Area, so Education NKEA, Executive Director of PADU, or Education Performance and Delivery Unit, Director of the Education Planning and Research Division, and Deputy Director General of Education for Policy and Curriculum. So there's a lot of policies that Datuk Habibah has touched on, meaning formulated, implemented, overseen. The biggest one being Malaysian Education Blueprint for 2013 to 2025. So guys, please ask questions. This is your chance to actually ask anything that you are curious about. So let's pass the floor to Datuk Habibah. So the floor is that Datuk Habibah will present, and then you can ask questions. To ask questions, probably you can just type in the chat function, and then when it comes to Q&A, I will call you up, and then you can ask directly. The reason to why we're asking you to type into the chat function is sequence, so that I know who to call first, second, and so on. So Datuk Habibah, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for coming to my class.
Thank you. Let me just share the slide. Assalamualaikum. Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you for inviting me to this session. I was given this topic, quality in Malaysia education system. So the premise that I was given is that the presentation should be based on my own experience in overseeing the Malaysia education system. Thus, it's more of tacit knowledge rather than what you find in textbooks. Also, Doria did mention about whether I can touch on macro level management. So I guess based on this premise, I thought that perhaps I should touch upon the Malaysia Education Blueprint because at one point of time when I was in the Delivery Management Office overseeing the national key economic areas for education, I was asked to join the Program Management Office. There were 5 of us that were asked to join this office. In fact, it was a newly set up office, and the function was to develop the Malaysia Education Blueprint. In fact, we had other blueprints before, even in 2001 up to 2010 and so on. But this is a slightly different blueprint, in that the minister at that point of time wanted something that's seminal. He wanted to pioneer something that's groundbreaking in terms of how do we transform the education system. Thus, I think this blueprint is important on the topic of quality in the Malaysia education system. As an introduction, I guess from when we did have one education system, which is after independence, we've always strived on ensuring students get access to education, and the education that we are delivering should be of certain quality. And how an education system is being judged in terms of quality is on how much students learn and develop during their time in the education system. That's how we gauge on the outcome of students. So based on our national education philosophy, our approach to education is focused on developing students holistically, in an integrated manner, we said, in all its dimensions, whether physical, spiritual, emotionally, as well as intellectually. All students, we say in our Act, Education Act, Act 550, will have the opportunity to attain an excellent education that is uniquely Malaysian. I think that's one of the premise when we developed the Malaysia education system, when we received independence. We wanted one education system that can unite children of different races, of different religion, because we are such a multi-ethnic country. So it's not meaning that we do not have vernacular schools. Vernacular schools are a legacy that is retained, but at the same time, how do you ensure that it is a one education system that can inculcate, nationalism, patriotism, integration, national integration? So it is binded by the curriculum, it's binded by the examination system. So building upon this education system that we've developed since independence, we've seen that our Malaysia education system has come a long way, and relatively in a very short time. And we can see this either in terms of access, where you see at primary level, it's already universal. This is the percentage, 96% participation was way back. Now we are already at 98%, but it gets even more difficult to reach out to the 2% that's either already in the system and dropped out, or those that have not been in the system at all. Where are they? How do we get them into the system to get 100% participation? So the smaller the percentage becomes, the more difficult it is to know where they are and to cater to their needs. Likewise, we've seen on other indicators as well that we have progressed and improved across time. And the government is committed. We know that year on year, we do receive the biggest federal government allocation to the Ministry of Education. No less than 16% of the budget goes to the Ministry of Education. We also see a narrowing of gap, but the biggest challenge is how competitive is our education system as compared to other systems. So we latch upon international assessments like TIMSS, Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. We also participate in the Program for International Student Assessment, which is PISA. And it doesn't show that we are doing as well in international assessments, while locally we are. So we do not want to be just what we say as village champions. We want to be competitive and be at par with other high performing systems of the world. So we are facing new challenges, rising international education standards. We are also looking at better preparing children for the 21st century. We are also receiving increased public and parental expectations of educational policies. So the Malaysia education system aspires to elevate the quality of our student outcomes to be at a level at par with top performing education systems in the world. So how do we cater to these new challenges and be at par with other systems in the world? So I think when the PMO was set up to come up with the Malaysia Education Blueprint, one of the questions when we met with the Minister of Education then was, what is it that you want us to do? What exactly is the objective in setting up the PMO and in coming up with the Malaysia Education Blueprint? The team needs to understand what does it stand for. So when we posed that question, that was our first question, and his answer was, other people have come to me and told me that our Malaysia education system is good. But my question is, how good is good? So I need evidences, I need a baseline of where we are and how we are progressing in terms of improving our education system. So that was our premise on how we conduct and come up with the Malaysia Education Blueprint. So I think in your management, quality management, I think you need to fully understand when you do the management portion, what is the objective and goal of your organization? Just like for me, being new in the PMO, all of us were new. We needed to understand what's our goal here, what's our objective here before we even start. If we do not understand, we may not meet the expectations of our bosses. And if we do not meet the expectation, then we may need to repeat our action or we need to redo what we've done, so that we will be aligned to what is expected of us. So having understood that, we need to understand how good is good. So what did we do? One, to understand the current performance, the strength and the weaknesses that has brought us to that level of performance. Having understood where we were, that was the baseline, our starting point. So based on that starting point, where is it that we wanted to go? So we need to establish a vision and aspirations for the system and for the students. So while earlier blueprints looked at the system, so we do have system aspirations or goals, but our aspiration for student has always been very high level, which is leveraged on the philosophy, national philosophy of education, right? So philosophy being philosophical, you need to then interpret it. So this time we said, why don't we have specific targets for in terms of aspirations for students? So we do have aspirations for the system and aspiration for students as well. Then Malaysia has always done beautiful blueprints before, right? But our challenge has been on delivering the blueprint. So this time around, we said, not just anchoring on the baseline and moving or taking off from the baseline and knowing where you want to go, but how do you want to go about it? So the third objective was to outline the transformation program for the system. How are we going to deliver this blueprint that we are developing? So how did we actually go about in developing the blueprint? Firstly, we did an education review because we wanted to know the baseline of where we are. So we did a review and a diagnostic of the education system. So that was then presented to the Prime Minister then to get his endorsement. Based on that endorsement and from the review, we understood some of the factors and challenges that has brought us to that level of performance. And we wanted to look deeper into those challenges and what could we do in order to transform the education system. So we identified 9 main challenges, and that was deliberated, and we came up with specific initiatives on how we will transform on these 5 factors. So that was conducted in the education labs. There were 9 labs looking at each of the 9 factors that we have identified. At the same time, we also did public consultation. We had dialogues, we had town halls across all the states in Malaysia. We also opened up a platform so that people can send in memorandums, their papers, any feedback, any comments, so that we can consider, we can take into account in developing our blueprint. So unlike previous blueprints, we had a preliminary blueprint which was launched in September 2012. So the blueprint is from 2013 to 2025. So before we finalize the blueprint, we wanted public to have a look at what has been put into the preliminary blueprint, because we want the confidence that rakyat see that we have listened to them, their voices are heard, and this is how we have interpreted it into the Malaysia Education Blueprint. But if they are not satisfied, we are giving them further opportunity to give their feedback to the preliminary blueprint. So another round of consultation, and finally the blueprint was finalized and launched in 2013. So the blueprint is from 2013 to 2025. But in the process, before it's launched, it's not just public consultation. We had cabinet workshops so that cabinet can give their feedback. We also presented to Council of Rulers and Chief Ministers. So that's the first time a blueprint is presented to the Council of Rulers. In fact, the Council of Rulers requested that we present to them because they were also interested to see how we are going about with this new transformation, as we said. Okay, so that's the process, which is, I think, unique because it listened to various voices from rakyat, from cabinet, from Council of Rulers. We had various feedbacks. So to me, this is how we developed this shared vision or aspiration for the transformation. 3 things that are unique to this blueprint, other than the ones that I've said before, is that the National Dialogue on Education is the largest public consultation process ever undertaken by the ministry. It has not done such public consultation before. In fact, no other ministry has done it before. After the Ministry of Education did it, other ministries came and asked us how to go about doing it as well. So we see nowadays a lot more public consultation and dialogues going on other issues as well. The second thing is that year on year, we saw a positive trajectory either at the primary level or at the secondary level on the performance of our students. So this time around, we are not just looking internally, but we are also anchoring on performance against international standards. So we refer to TIMSS and PISA, and we draw upon international expertise such as UNESCO, World Bank, OECD. So they have their own study and reports based on the Malaysia education system. So we referred to those reports. We also had independent international review panel members who are independent, at the international level. So we had one from Singapore, one from Korea, one from Canada, Ontario, Canada, and we also had one from OECD, which conducts the PISA assessment. So this international review panel members stress test our how we conducted our review exercise and also how we framed the Malaysia Education Blueprint. So it's good to get validation as well as feedback at the international level. It's also focused on implementation, not just on policy. So we have a transformation of the state and district education officers so that they can support the transformation better. And one thing that we did that we have never done before was to also establish a delivery unit called PADU, Performance and Delivery Unit, to drive the blueprint delivery. So these are the 5 system aspirations: access, quality, equity, unity, efficiency. In fact, we asked our top management, including our minister, what in years to come, what do you want the blueprint to be remembered for? I think there was consensus, although we asked them separately the same question, each of them answered quality. So we do have access, equity there all along since independence. We also had quality coming in a little bit later, but we know that although we have these 5 system aspirations, underlying across is quality of the system. Even when we talk about access, we want children to participate in education, but the kind of education that we are providing them should be of a certain quality. Likewise, when we want more equity, we want fairness, it also means providing quality education to everyone. We want inclusiveness, for instance. We want opportunities for children not just to participate, but to fulfill needs as well. So that goes towards quality and inclusiveness. Unity has always been the goal for the education system. So this is the first time it has become an aspiration and with a specific target, so that children in the education system can obtain experiences and embrace diversity in the education system, as well as, they can then embrace it when they are in the community and society as well. Efficiency, the size of the cake, although we receive the biggest portion, the size of the cake cannot keep on increasing. So we have to maximize or optimize student outcomes based on the investment that we receive year on year. So now the student aspiration is based on the national philosophy of education. And also we looked at what is needed in the 21st century and with what is important in our context. So while knowledge has always been important when we talk about education, knowledge and skills, but we see that as we progress, it's not just a matter of memorizing that knowledge and then you recall, but also you need the thinking skills as well. So one of the student aspiration is also on thinking skills. Language is very important, while the national language is to unite our students, but English is an international language. So we talk about bilingual proficiency with a more ambitious target for both Malay and English language. But we also encourage other languages as well. And of course, we want to develop national identity, our students to have leadership skills, ethics, and spirituality, because we said it should be a wholesome, a holistic development of our students. So now how do we bring about this system aspiration and student aspirations? We talk about how do we deliver our blueprint. So we come up with 11 shifts on how we want to bring about this change. So these 11 shifts may be operational, it may be strategic. What it also means that the Ministry of Education needs to do things differently from what it is used to before. It's not business as usual because this is a very ambitious blueprint. Now, there must be a rigor in terms of tracking, monitoring the progress in the delivery of the blueprint. So we do have the initiative planning. So various initiatives are set in place, and these initiatives all contribute towards achieving the aspirations that we have set. So we need to drill, we need to plan the initiative well in order to achieve those aspirations. So each initiative has got a charter which lays down the scope as well as the various concepts within the initiative, what the initiative means, what's the scope and the concept of the initiative, the key performance indicators, what is it that this initiative will achieve. So that key performance indicators or KPIs need to be properly defined. So you have the KPI definition, how you measure it, what's the methodology in measuring the KPI. It needs to be drilled down really well so that the people who is delivering the initiative knows how to do it and it can be delivered. So there are action plans and also what we call a 3-feet plan, which includes the budget as well as the detailed action plan. So it's not just a matter of coming up with the action plan, but the action plan must be one that's ready to go. So you need the budget and you need a detailed action plan. What steps will be taken? Who is responsible for those steps? How do you know those steps have been successfully carried out? So we do have what we call as the dashboard based on a traffic light system to track and monitor progress of the initiatives. So we have program managers and we have officers in charge to update the dashboard. So it will tell us how the initiatives are progressing every week for those initiatives that we prioritize. And on a monthly basis for those initiatives we call as secondary initiatives that require less support in terms of delivery. It's less, perhaps smaller in scale and perhaps less problematic compared to the priority initiative. Priority initiatives are those especially with huge impacts and perhaps more complex to deliver. Based on the traffic light system, we will know each week whether the initiatives are either green, amber, or red. Green means it's on track. Amber means there are certain issues that if you don't tackle it, it will become red. Red means you're having issues with delivering the initiative. So for those that are in amber or in red, it will go to problem solving meeting, we call it, which is a platform for decision making. Because certain issues that are amber or red requires you to problem solve deeper, as well as perhaps you need higher authority to make certain decisions than just your program managers and your officers in charge that's handling the initiatives. So the problem solving meeting is important to get certain decisions and how that initiative will move forward. We also have mid-year review to see whether the KPIs that we have set by that year is on track. During the mid-year review, we will have deep dive sessions for those initiatives that are more problematic compared to others. You need to drill down. So that's why we call it deep dive. You need to go deeper to understand what's happening and how we can solve it. We also do gallery walks so that all the initiatives are presented, and those that we have invited can give their comments during the gallery walk. We also have performance dialogue, for the various initiatives, for them to not just present where they are, but also the issues and how to move forward based on their progress. At the end of the year, we do another session, which we call also as the post-mortem of the initiatives at the end of the year, whether we have actually met the targets or not, what are some of the lessons that we have learned, and how we are going to move or plan for the following year. Because it is a journey that we are going through. It's a 13-year journey. So we need to make sure that our year-on-year tracking will ultimately lead towards the 2025 targets. And some of the targets are much earlier on, because we have faced the blueprint delivery in 3 waves, 2013 to 2015. So there are some targets which we need to meet by 2015. There are other targets for the next wave, which is from 2016 up to 2020. And now we are in the third wave, 2016 to 2025. So for those targets that are not met, for instance, you need to do something so that it doesn't accumulate and jeopardize your journey towards 2025 and meeting the goals, right? So I think the lesson here, perhaps in terms of our management, is that it doesn't stop at just the planning. The planning itself is so rigorous because you need to take into account various aspects. You need to involve various people to make sure that the planning process is rigorous, to make sure that what you have planned will actually be able, you will be able to deliver. But then after you have launched or there is approval for your plan, the delivery itself is important. It doesn't stop at just the document. You must make sure that there is follow through. So to make sure that the follow through is on track, right? You just can't leave people to carry on. There must be a tracking and monitoring, which is also rigorous. And if it is not on track, what are you supposed to do? How do you manage this then? So there must be a monitoring and tracking system against the targets that you have set. So 8 years on, are we on the right track to achieve the aspirations of the Malaysia Education Blueprint? So every year we come out with our annual report, because we have public who have given feedback into how to develop the blueprint. The blueprint has been launched. So we are committed to make sure that our blueprint targets are met. So we do publish annual reports to denote where we are, the progress we've made, and how we are moving forward on those initiatives and achieving our targets. So I've picked one of the initiative, right? Because there's many, and I don't think we have the time. Even now, I think I've passed my time, but I'll go quickly. Although there's positive trajectory at the primary and secondary level on student performance, but if we drill down further, we see that there are variances across states and across districts within states. So that denotes that equity issues across as well as within states. So now UPSR has been abolished this year, since this year, but we can still use, this is in 2011, that's when we started to review and analyze our data to come up with the blueprint. And this was the data then. So we see there's almost a 30-point difference, percentage difference between the highest performing as well as the lowest performing states at the primary level, and close to 20% at the upper secondary level. And we also see in the graph on the right, there's a bar for each state in UPSR as well as SPM, UPSR primary level, SPM upper secondary level. The box for each of the bar denotes the average, while the length of the bar shows the variance of performance within the state. So the bigger the bar, the bigger the variance. So for instance, if you look at the UPSR result and at Johor, for instance, there's only a very small variance. It's almost on the dot, right? There's a very small variance among the districts in the state. But if you look at Kelantan, if you look at Kedah, you look at Sabah, you see a bigger stretch that denotes bigger variance within those states. And we see the variances are even bigger at the upper secondary level, right? So what does this mean? This means that how you, in simplified terms, in which state the student goes, the students are, in which district the students are, and in which school the student is studying would affect their academic performance, because there are variances of school performance depending on the district as well as the state the school is in. So that's not equitable in terms of provision of quality education for everyone. So what the blueprint comes up with is called the District Transformation Program, where previously districts' job is more of administrative purposes. You know, things from the ministry goes down, right down to the state, to the district, to the school, and back up again. So it's more of administrative flow. But then we see success stories across other countries that have transformed. They leverage on the middle layer. So which layer do we want to leverage, the state or the district? So the nearest to the school is the district. So we are leveraging on the district. So that's why we come up with the District Transformation Program, which is closest to the school in order to accelerate school performance. And we saw best practices in certain states like Johor that have performed or moved up at the primary level quickly. In 5 years, they have moved from a mediocre state to a high-performing state in terms of performance at the primary level. So we came up with this modeling, which has a support portion where we empower local leadership. We gave more empowerment. We restructured the JPN, the State Education Office, as well as the PPD, which is the District Education Office. We also give support to the state as well as the district, more at the district, I think, because we put in school improvement partners to support, to coach school leaders. We also put in school improvement specialist coaches to coach and support teachers who are not doing that well in their classrooms. So they need to identify which are those teachers, which are those classes and the teachers within classes that require the support. We targeted at 3 subjects, which is mathematics, Malay language, as well as English language. I think other than giving the support, we also need accountability for the support that we give. So we do have KPIs for them, which is anchored on access, quality, and equity. We also do monitoring, problem solving, and taking action. So we have performance dialogues, district with schools, state with districts, and the ministry with the states. So we need to monitor how they are progressing against the access, quality, and equity KPIs that we have set for each of them. So now we cannot leave our state, our districts, alone by themselves because this is a new program. So we came up with data-driven decision making, which has how do you go about collecting data? How do you report on those data? How do you identify the issues as well as the areas of concern? How do you prioritize among those issues? How do you then do your planning on how you then do your take your action or specific interventions based on the root causes that you have identified, right? So it is a rigorous process of data-driven decision making, and it's a guided one because some may not be able to do it on their own. We cannot assume that people are on the same level. So they need to be clear on what they need to do, on how to identify their root causes, as well as to come up with the specific interventions, because we do not want a one-size-fits-all solution. It has to be through root cause identification and coming up with your own localized textual intervention. So it has shown some successes where we've seen at the primary level a small narrowing of gap between urban and rural, but then with a change of the curriculum, there has been slight widening. But we have seen more successes at the upper secondary level where there is a narrowing of gap year on year, where after 8 years, we have narrowed up to 38% of the gap we've seen. But our target is 50% by 2020, urban-rural gap narrowed. So it has yet to receive its target of 50%. So that's a challenge for us. So how do we move forward? So there must be commitment, continued commitment of our key leaders and also at the various levels. There must be strengthening in terms of capacity, because we see that it's not a matter of just collecting the data, but you need to understand the data, to interpret it, right? And then to come up with your specific intervention in order for you to then try to solve the root cause, right? So that's a challenge. Also in coming up with the targeted and differentiated interventions based on root causes. It's not just the data, but how then do you then frame and come up with a specific intervention, and to maintain the rigor of performance dialogue, because that's when you can test, not just monitoring, but test whether your intervention have worked. If not, how do you then adjust? How do you then improve upon it? At the international level, we have not reached center point of TIMSS, and we've not reached the average of OECD, but then we still see improvements where there is a narrowing towards the OECD average and towards the TIMSS center point. And this is mainly due to the review of the curriculum, both at the primary level and the new curriculum at the secondary level, standard-based curriculum. Moving forward, we need to ensure accountability at all levels. Accountability to me is about delivering on the commitment that we've made. So everyone in the education system, since you are involved with the business of education, you are committed to education. Thus, you are accountable to the progress, performance of education. So this has been what I stressed upon during my term as the DG, where I anchored on student participation. We need to get students into the education system, and when they are in the education system, they need to learn. So what are the kind of things that we offer to meet the needs of students, and what are the important things that students should learn? And if students do not learn and acquire at least minimum acquisition by the end of secondary level, for instance, they don't get any certification, that means the system is not efficient enough. We are failing certain portion of our students. So an efficient education system shouldn't fail anyone that goes through the education system. So it's not a matter of making sure students perform, but students should leave the education system also with meeting certain standards, meeting certain acquisition of learning. So to ensure that student participation, student learn, you need quality teachers and school leaders. So I also focused on these. And the other is on assessment. It's not looking at who's number 1, number 2, number 3, but to look at the database to understand if we have performed well, what did we do good? If we have not performed so well, where have we not done so, and how do we improve? So I think we have reports from the World Bank, for instance, that say that our education system have actually a lot of data, but we are not so good at using that data for informed decision making, right? So we need to understand the data and to learn from the data, how do we then improve the education on the teaching and learning in our schools. So I look at accountability on student participation, on student learning, on quality of teachers and school leaders, as well as student assessment. Those 4 things that I have prioritized. And I just want to look at the teachers. So if previously, before the blueprint, we had a lot of teachers who, candidates who applied, who had only 0 to 2 A's, that denotes, low achievement. While achievement is not necessarily, an indicator of a good teacher, but it is an indicator for us to gauge the candidates that we are taking into the teaching profession. And up to 70% that we do take in before was only with 0 to 2 A's, right? So these people who have taken in as our teachers will remain in the system for a long time. At that time, when we were developing our blueprint, 60% of our teachers will remain in the system for the next 20 years. So that means we need to continuously develop our teachers who are already in the system. Well, even those with high entrance qualification, we need to continuously improve because things keep changing. But more so, given the intake that we have into our profession. But after the blueprint, when we change the criteria of entrance, minimum of 5 A's, that will put us to 30% of our best performing students into the teaching profession. But we see those that we do take into our IPG, teacher training institutions, are 20%, even better, top 20%, even better than the target that we have set. Into our IPTAs, our public tertiary institution is top 25% of SPM graduates. So it is much better than the target that we have set. And this brings us at par to other systems like Finland, Hong Kong, Singapore, British Columbia, Poland, which we know are performing better than us in TIMSS and PISA, right? So at least in terms of our teacher qualification, we are getting a better entrance. But it's not just teachers, but also the quality of our school leaders. So previously, there weren't any preparation of head teachers. So now we have the MPQEL. And even for the MPQEL, we need them to meet certain threshold before they can be appointed as school leaders, and to have continuous professional support for them as well through our professional development program. So I need to go faster. So now, 2020, we had the COVID situation. So while we acknowledge that closure of schools reduced the likelihood of COVID-19 to infect and spread amongst our school children, closure nonetheless would likely cause huge loss of learning. It affected more than 5 million children in our education system in more than 10,000 schools. and more than 440,000 teachers were affected as well in terms of the teaching and learning. But this is not unique to Malaysia. Across the world, we see about the same time last year, March, April, 1.4 billion learners were also affected. So it doesn't mean that with school closures, learning stops. When we had the first MCO, Movement Control Order, school were on holiday, so it's natural. There's no teaching learning going on. But when it was extended, we cannot continue not having teaching and learning. So we came up with the home-based learning, either online, offline, or offsite, online, particularly using our DELIMA platform, Digital Educational Learning Initiative Malaysia, which is our online learning platform, but you can use other platforms as well. We reintroduced TV Pendidikan, terrestrial-based TV. We had already moved to web-based, but we know that we are lacking in terms of devices as well as connectivity amongst our students. So another way of reaching out to them is through the educational TV, where we see that 98% of households do own televisions. We do distribute learning packs, either from school or from designated areas, but then we see there are issues to it. For instance, readiness of our students, teachers, as well as parents to switch to home-based learning. Our curricula cannot be adapted quickly enough to home-based learning because it wasn't designed for such. And we are also depriving certain expertise and resources available in school, particularly to those children with special needs. And we also see when school reopen, what kind of guidelines, SOPs need to be in place, because the situation is still the same. We still face COVID-19 situation. We are still in crisis. So how do we then handle school reopening? How do we then handle students that have missed out, that have, been affected by loss of learning? How do schools handle them? And assessment itself, while we did away with UPSR as well as with PT3, primary as well as lower secondary, but we can't do away with SPM because it is a certification for further education as well as into the world of work. So it had to be rescheduled 3 times before finally we did manage to do it. But then again, because it was delayed, how do we fasten the process of marking and scoring, because this cohort needs to enter further education or go into the world of work according to the timeline. So we then opted for online marking and scoring. Out of 83 papers, 82, right? 82 out of 83 papers were marked online. We also had a second sitting for those students who were affected and could not sit for the SPM the first round. So this is a first time for a second sitting, as well as a first time for all except 1 papers to be marked online. So for me, governance is very important in times of crisis like this, the ability to be flexible and adaptable to various situational of the crisis. Empowerment, especially on how you handle day-to-day operations of the school in times of crisis. But then again, it shouldn't run away from the guidelines and SOPs that have been set, as well as decisions that have already been made at the federal level. Empathy is also important and a priority because there's a strain on parents and students because of the crisis situation, even when school has already been reopened. We know that certain families have fallen into the poor group, even though previously they are not. Some parents are laid off work, right? So how do we pay attention to these struggles among students and their family? How do we then support their learning, mental health issues? How do we make sure that students are continuously engaged? And the curricula too, as I've said before, need to be more flexible and adaptable to the various changes. And we see the challenges. I'll just pick on one, where 60% of teachers are only able to complete 21 to 60% of the learning topics during the home-based learning. So that means there's a lot of things that needs to be covered, or how do we pick up? How do we ensure there's no loss of learning when children come back to school? So I've put some of the things that we need to consider in the next normal on the flexibility in learning, you know, even though it's no longer crisis, but you know, in the fourth industrial revolution, there should be more of a hybrid, not just in school, but also flexibility in learning at home as well. Ownership of devices and connectivity, how do we gauge learning gaps among children? How do you then narrow that gap and monitor it? How do you provide comprehensive services to help students adjust, readjust and catch up? The teacher support, teachers too need to be supported. They are also not used to the home-based learning, nor to the reopening on how to cope with the children with various situations. Continued role of distant learning, shifting role of learning assessment. We are now moving more towards school classroom-based assessment. So how do we then make sure that classroom-based assessment are more of a quality? How do we provide psychosocial support and so on and so forth? And there are also implications going forward because we know that the COVID situation is not just the fourth industrial revolution, but the COVID situation has also expedited the use of the digital technology. Remote work will continue. Digitization has already sped up. Automation has already increased. So what has started before the COVID situation has expedited, has changed faster than what we see. But we know that even before the COVID situation, there are gaps between what is provided among our graduates and what actually employment requires. So there's a gap between the knowledge skills provided in our schools, in our education institutions, and what's required in the workforce. And most of it are anchored on digital technology, many, not all, many, and also some soft skills that are also as important as the hard skills. So I'll skip this one. So the blueprint, while we talk about access, when I say participation, we were talking about getting children to school, but we see that when schools are closed, we also need to consider other alternatives, other platforms on how children can continue to learn. We talk about quality, but quality now also means delivering more of a hybrid kind of teaching and learning. We talk about equity. How do we then address equity when we even have issues in terms of devices, connectivity, delivery of the teaching and learning itself? Unity, how do we ensure unity when children are not in school, right? How do we maximize the use of these various platforms so that it becomes more efficient in the delivery of teaching and learning? So I think with regards to the blueprint and in terms of the management topic that we are talking about, we need to fully uphold and embrace the planning that we have set. In this case, I've anchored on the blueprint. There must be effective communication so that all those involved, and in this place, it's not just people in the ministry, state, district, and school, but also the public as well, need to be properly communicated on how we do things, on how we progress on those things. How do we get further feedback on the delivery? Focus on outcome-based KPI. It shouldn't be based on assumptions and, okay, we are good on track. It needs to be based on certain indicators, performance indicators. And because of that, there must be a strong discipline of program management as well. There must be strong problem solving, you know, because you need to get everything on track. And there must be in-depth planning and prudent spending year on year, because when budget becomes the limit, how do you then make sure that your initiatives are still delivered, even though within the restraints of the budgeting? I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Datuk Habibah, for your lecture. It was there's a lot of information that we can talk about. How much time do we have with you, Datuk? Because I want to gauge how many questions that I can pick up from the students.
I'm fine.
Fine. Okay.
if people are willing to.
Okay. Now, before guys, before you ask your question, can I acknowledge Prof Yo? Prof Yo is in the hall at the moment with us. Prof Yo, thanks so much for coming to our session today. Would you like to ask your question directly to Dr. Habibah? Sorry for putting you in the spot.
Thank you, Datuk Habibah, and also Dr. Doria. Datuk Habibah, I have a few questions, but I think I'll ask one question only. Now, when we talk about the unity thing, I'm looking at the unity among these young people, because young people, they're developing their own personality, their mind, and they are not empty slate. They do have something in their mind, and they know what kind of unity that they want. So, in your opinion, to what extent the concept of unity of these young people is affected by the ecosystem of the social media and also the macro system of the belief system in our country? I hope you get my question. Thank you, Dato'.
Oh, that's a huge thing. I had one session on just this topic. So
I see.
to answer it simply, I think we do have a huge challenge. It's not just a matter of the social media or how the whole society looks at unity, but in terms of how we address it in the education system itself, because we know that our education system is based on the legacy that we have built upon. So we do have, for instance, our vernacular schools, even at the primary level. So this means that many of our children are already separated based on race at the primary level. We cannot deny that, you know, for SK schools, majority are Malay. Although we have other races, but majority are Malay. Then the SJKC, majority are Chinese, although we have other races. SJKT are mostly in Tamil children, even though there are other races within it. So in a way, they are already segregated at the young age. And even when they do come together at the secondary level, how much can we do with them in terms of inculcating unity amongst them? So I think in terms of the school itself, right, not even social, even among the school itself, it's a huge challenge. The kind of activities that we do to unite children. Well, we have been very sensitive of this in our educational materials, either in textbooks and other resources. You know, it's so difficult that, you know, when you do have children within a certain picture, illustration in the textbook, for instance, we must make sure that there are representatives of the various race in the illustration, or what we use is not sensitive to any race or religion within the resource that we are trying to illustrate. In fact, when we did the blueprint, you see the cover of the blueprint, we counted the number of boys and girls. We also counted to make sure that there's enough representatives from the various races as well, because we wanted the faces of children. The blueprint is about students, you know, so we wanted it to be the pictures of students. But then it's not as simple as that. It's not a matter of just, you know, putting in. There must be enough representative in terms of gender, in terms of the racial composition as well. So that's how detailed or sensitive the Ministry of Education is towards inculcating these differences among the different groups of children. But then again, as I've said, the challenge is how do we then bring them together? In fact, to answer your question, it's not easy, and we have not been as successful. Even when we came out with the blueprint, we didn't have a yardstick on how to measure unity at that time amongst children and amongst teachers too. So we looked at Japanese, you know, Jabatan Perpaduan dan Integrasi Nasional. So they didn't have a yardstick for our teachers and students. So we came out with an instrument with them as well as other stakeholders as well. So we then measure every 2 years. So we already have 6 measures. In the 8 years of the delivery of the blueprint, we already have 3 times that we've measured. And the first time that we measured, we know that it's moderate. The second time and the third time we measured, it's also moderate. So that's good in terms of sustaining, but are we actually satisfied with sustaining whilst it is an aspiration that we want, you know, system aspiration as well as student aspiration, we want national integration, right? So that's not good enough. And even in moderate, if we analyze deeper, is it moderate high? Is it moderate average, or is it moderate low? Even that you can differentiate. And where is it more strong? Is it in Terengganu? Is it in KL? Where is it? We know that as well. So we know certain details of unity amongst our children, but then how do we go about encouraging, inculcating unity? And definitely participation from the public, from the society, and through various platforms, which you denote, social media is very strong in this, you know, has an influence. We have tried using online platforms, for instance, during home-based learning, you know, when children are not in school and you can't have physical activities, for instance, how do we then encourage unity? Through online platforms. So we do try to do that as well. And we do report on how children participate on these various online platforms. And we do have sessions where we involve teachers as well as parents in on our online platform to talk about things on unity, as well as encouraging during these platforms people of various races to come and be involved and having these conversations. I hope it helps, but I guess in the long term, it shouldn't be just the Ministry of Education trying to promote this. It should also be other people as well. You know, while we can't have a lot of physical activities when we are in during restricted time, but then through online platform, for instance, now, like now we are doing, how do we encourage even unity, you know, during these sessions, either specific, targeted for it, or even when it's not targeted, how do you still encourage during those sessions?
Prof, you're not sure if that answers completely the question that you're trying to ask just
Yeah,
now.
because I don't think I
Yeah,
have a
it's a bit-
direct answer.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doria. Allow me to give only one sentence. I agree with you, Dato. You always shed some light, you know, when in all your talks. Now, there's one thing that that is in my heart. It is very much about the deeds from the teachers. The deeds include their words, you know, in how they talk to the students. That really matters because they are teenagers, you know. They are easily hurt with those words. And I hope all teachers remember the 5th principle of Rukun Negara, the kesopanan dan kesusilaan. Thank you. Thank you, Dato'. Thank you, Dr. Doria.
Thank you, Prof. Yo, for the question. Now I see in the chat function is starting to heat up. Fadila, would you like to come in first?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Doria. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day to Datuk Dr. Habibah. Okay, my question is, wait, okay,
You're
how
asking about
to
learning,
yeah,
21st
how
century learning.
to prepare the 21st century learning with support to the aspiration or SDG, whereas the facilities or infrastructure become a major obstacles even though in city school.
Okay. I think we are a little, well, for me, I think that we are a little bit delayed in terms of how we equip our schools as well as our students, in terms of making sure that we are on track, particularly when we talk about 21st century learning. You need changes in the classroom as well as changes in terms of how you go about delivering teaching and learning. So when I do give presentations, for instance, I always picture, illustrate using, if previously we learned with desks arranged, typical classroom arrangement, but with 21st century learning, it may be arranged differently because you require a lot more of room work, teamwork, and the way you go about the teaching learning processes as well within the classroom may differ, which require a rearrangement of the physical of the classroom, and you require other equipments as well. So I guess it has been delayed in terms on how we handle these things. It's not just 21st century learning, but I guess because I don't want to put the blame on our investment on education, but because it's already huge. But then how do we prioritize among, the various things that we need to allocate? There need to be a prioritization. Even though we cannot transform our schools in 1 year, but how do we then strategize to progressively transform our schools? For instance, it's not even because there's already efforts in PAK 21, Pendidikan Abad ke-21, which focuses on how do we, enhance teaching and learning beyond just the physical of the classroom and schools. So I think that can be done, even though the physicals will take time. Either the classroom itself or the equipment and facilities that goes with it will take time in terms of the ministry supplying it. Or the teachers can also, the schools can work with alumni, with various private sector, NGOs on how to go about turning classrooms into 21st century classroom. But beyond that, the teaching and learning itself can happen, and that may not require a lot of investment into it if our teachers are creative and innovative enough. Because we know a lot of teachers that we have identified, which we have denoted them as icons, who are very creative in terms of coming up with new approaches to teaching and learning, which is more appropriate, I would say, towards 21st century learning. So these may require the own initiative of the teachers. If you rely everything on the government to provide, that will take time. Even when we talk about, computers, connectivity, it's still an issue to be addressed. Some schools still would have issues on it because we know we gauge through our SSQS indicator on how schools are creating that environment, that conducive environment in schools. And we know that although many are above the threshold, but there are not many that are within the 4 and 5 star. There are still the majority in the 3 star. So how do we move them, shift them towards the 4 and 5 star, which is a better kind of environment to support digital learning, for instance, which is part of 21st century learning. And it has a direct correlation with digital competencies of children, because we know from our analysis that schools that can provide better digital learning environment have more students that are digitally competent. So there's a positive correlation between the two. So for those students that are in schools that are less equipped with those kind of environment would be affected in terms of how they cope with this kind of competency, which is essential for 21st century. So I know, again, I've not answered it directly, but then definitely it will take time for government or the ministry to provide the necessary, for schools. But then if schools themselves can take the initiative, there are many companies that are willing to support schools. Even now in crisis, we see a lot. It's also how our schools open up, and sell yourself, and also to receive support from outside. And also for our teachers too, to be more creative and innovative to handle, to manage the teaching and learning geared towards 21st century.
Hopefully that would answer Fadila's question. Fadila, any follow-up from that?
Yes, thank you very much, Datuk Doctor, for the response. It's just my concern because if you can see the blueprint, it's from 2013 to 2025. So it just left then maybe around 4 years, but still we lack of this the infrastructure. That's my concern because I'm teaching the mathematics. So to achieve the TIMSS and PISA standard is quite, big gap. If you want to compare with the other countries, the closest countries like Singapore. So I feel that the difficulties here, obstacles for me. Okay, as Datuk Doctor said, yes, I agree. I agree that our teachers have to be creative and innovative. But yeah, again, it's not like only one teacher. It's must be one group of teachers. Not it can be accomplished by only a person.
Yeah, that's true. You need a pool of teachers within the school that are motivated, that can push the agenda, and supported by the school leadership as well. Then only it's easier for you to move as a team within the school. I think that since you brought up TIMSS and PISA, when I was younger and I was involved in that time, there wasn't PISA yet. We participated in TIMSS first. So when we participated and we didn't do well, the next cycle we targeted on how we prepared our teachers as well as our students. We didn't have the questions because this is not something that you can memorize, but we focused more on the kind of questions. Our curriculum at that time didn't have a lot of higher order thinking, embedded within it. So our exams too were not focused on higher order thinking. There weren't the items in our exams were not on higher order. It's more on memorization and recall because our curriculum is as such. So it's only in our new curriculum, our standard curriculum, that we have a lot more of the higher order thinking kind of things within the curriculum, and the assessment has been changed to progressively include more higher order thinking kind of questions. But through the preparation that we did in making sure that teachers and students understand, these are the kind of questions. This is how you need to think. Because it's not just the students, the teachers too need to understand, because we gave the same paper, previous ones, to our teachers, and our teachers made the same mistakes as our students, because they are not familiar with the kind of questions. But with that kind of support given, to our teachers and to our students, in the next cycle that we took, other countries were asking us, I remember because I attended the meeting, other countries were asking us, how did Malaysia become top 10 in mathematics? And at that time, this is not now. Now, our teachers are graduate teachers. At that time, we had a lot more of diploma holder teachers, at the lower secondary level, right? And at the primary level as well, primary and lower secondary level. We had a lot more of diploma teachers. So in terms of how we compare to other countries, our teachers are not graduates, right? They're more of diploma holders. So how do we become top 10? That was the question then. But after that, we declined. We couldn't hold on to the top 10 positions. So that means with the proper tuning on how we go about teaching and learning is very important on, getting our students to perform, to be able to handle higher order thinking kind of questions. So it's not a matter of, at that time, there wasn't any change in the physical or in the facilities that's provided to our students that took part. No, there wasn't any change, but only in gearing how they think, in gearing on how they can handle those kind of questions. It's not a matter of just complexity. Complexity doesn't mean higher order thinking. Even a low order kind of question can be complex, but it's the requirement of the thinking process itself. So whether our teachers and our students can handle those. Our students definitely, if we analyze TIMSS and PISA items, they do very well in the factual kind of items that require a lot of memorization and to recall in terms of answering. But when it requires a lot of analysis, interpretation, reasoning, then they do less well overall, generally. Although we do see some students performing well, but generally, those are the kind of items that our students are not performing very well. And now that we are also having our questions in TIMSS, it's in a transition state, doing both paper as well as doing computer-based. So when we compare our students that took manual and our, paper-based, and our students that took computer-based, our students that did paper-based did better than our students that did computer-based. So then again, comes with the familiarization. So students, when they are not familiarized, one is the questions itself. Second, when you now change from paper to computer, they don't do as well when it's computer-based. So that's a huge challenge. It's not a matter of just, having the physical, but then how do you attune your students to start thinking in a particular way and to also do things through a particular platform and through using particular, platforms as well.
Thank you so much, Datuk, for that. Munaswari, can you come in? The last question will be from Fikri before we close the session.
Hi,
Munaswari?
Doctor.
Yep.
Good evening. Okay, I want to ask about private institutions in Malaysia, like normally about schools, because we have variety of institutions here. Okay, though it's their choice to study in these private institutions, are they being included in the shifts designed to achieve the aspirations stated in the blueprint? Because these private institutions seems to be out of radar when it comes to quality. So how do we ensure our Malaysian students are also being taken care of, even though they are studying in private institutions?
So I guess that has always been a reminder within the Ministry of Education that, private institutions have to be included in the various activities that is carried out by the Ministry of Education, because private institution is part and parcel of the education system. Private institutions also use our curriculum. It's the international schools that use the international curriculum, but the private schools do use our local curriculum. So they should be seen as part and parcel of our education system as well. So you are right. And I do believe we need to have more engagements, and we need to have more involvement of the private schools in the education system. Because when we look at the outcomes of the education system, it cannot be just public or government schools. It's the whole education system that's involved. So you are right in pointing that out, but perhaps we've not been as successful in including everyone, whilst that should be the case.
So that Montessori, hopefully that answers your question. We should do more in terms of inclusivity. I think inclusivity for information, Dato, is something that we talk about in our class throughout the session. We talk about how to make sure that everyone is involved in the education process. So I have a question on that, but then let me bring Fikri in. Fikri? Fikri, we can't hear you.
Assalamualaikum,
Yes.
Datuk Dr. Nuria. Doctor, first of all, I'm sorry for asking a lot of questions. And I am sorry if the question I ask is a bit fasad, because I'm a new teacher. I still have a lot to learn, and I'm still searching for questions, for answers to my questions, Doctor. How did the Ministry of Education ensure all the aspirations, implementations were delivered as per mentioned in the blueprint, and avoid the communication breakdown, because it went to multiple stages from the Ministry of Education and then JPN, TPD before it reached teachers and pupils. That is question number 1. Question number 2, and how did the MOE nurture integrity, reliability and accountability, especially in reporting data? And last but not least, to what extent we, the educators, can nurture values to young people? Because this is my personal, based on my personal view, I could see that some young people are lacking in values. This might be due to, you know, the exposures that they get in social media. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. In terms of, I guess it's more of communication and making sure that there's the understanding from the federal, state, district, and to schools. I guess because you're new, perhaps, and but when we first launched the Malaysia Education Blueprint, we had a lot more messages that came about, on the Malaysia Education Blueprint. The blueprint itself is a big document, but it's not just the hard copies. You can also get the soft copies. And you also have the executive summary, which is a smaller document. And you also have brochures. And the brochures are in English, in Malay, as well as in Tamil and Chinese as well. So there's these various forms that we do disseminate the information on the blueprint so that it's better understood at the various level as well as the public. And we do disseminate the annual report as well every year so that people can still read and track on the progress of the blueprint. So I guess the other is through the dialogues that we have between the schools and the districts, between the districts and the states. If they don't understand the blueprint, I don't know how they do the dialogues. You need to understand what the blueprint is all about. Then only can you understand what the dialogue is all about and what's required for you to do and to follow up based on those dialogues. And the district transformation program goes to all states, goes to all districts, and it covers all schools as well. So to say that the schools do not know what the blueprint is all about, it's a little bit difficult to understand. I guess unless across time, it has diluted. But then again, dialogues are still happening. So I guess it's something that the ministry, the state, the district can look into so that the proper messaging is continuous so that people continue to be committed, because it's a 13-year journey. So I guess people have to be continuously reminded so that they are committed for this 13-year journey. Integrity is something that we are committed to. So I think it's something that as civil servant and as teachers, it's not something that we can question. It's something that we need to be. We need to be of the highest integrity and be the role model for others as well. You know, to be an integrity for me. It's not a matter of just not taking money. It's a matter of doing your best because you are paid, you are already binded to this business in the education system. I was the first in the Ministry of Education to receive this tokoh integrity. It's not trying to boast the tokoh integrity, but because it's the first time when I received that tokoh integrity, I asked, why am I chosen as the tokoh integrity? What does this tokoh integrity means? I didn't understand it in the first place. So my director at that point of time said that, one, it's not a matter of taking money because I'm not in a position to take money anyway. I don't handle, you know, projects where I do handle projects, but it's only money on paper. It's not physical money that I'm handling. Then the other one is because it's not to do with honesty, money. It's more of, one is to deliver things on time, to deliver things beyond, you know, beyond what is expected of me. In other words, it's the delivery of the things that you are committed to. That's part and parcel of the whole thing as integrity. Not to come late, you are punctual, right? Because you have your work. You can spend more time, it's okay, but not less than what you have committed to, right? If you need to deliver X, if you deliver also X plus plus, then it's more than what you are expected. That's part of integrity. It cannot be less than the X that you are expected to deliver. So I think being a teacher or being in the education system, everyone needs to demonstrate that you are of integrity and to model that for your peers as well as to the students, to the community as well. If you do not have that integrity, how do other people then value or judge you, and worse, your students? So to me, integrity is not something that we can question. It's something that we need to demonstrate and do, and to show that we are of integrity. Values, integrity is part of values as well. So I think among young, the best way of, you know, it's not just it is through modeling, and it's not just through the lessons in the classroom, but also beyond as well. So I think one of the things that we did when I was the DG before I retired was to launch the civic education, pendidikan civic. And that pendidikan civic is something that you want to inculcate, not just within the classroom, because it's got exemplars on how you can do that, but also in the daily life within the school. And civic is also something that needs to be practiced among the community as well. Because when we talk about civics, nilai, I think usually we take Japan as an example, right? When I first went to Japan, we were eating banana by the roadside. And we didn't throw the banana skin on the road. We did put in the bin. But then this one old lady came out of the restaurant where the bin was and started scolding us because we threw in the wrong bin. It wasn't the bin, you know, the recycling bin. So we couldn't understand and we threw it in the wrong one. So that's how disciplined they are. And that's part and parcel of values, where it's not just in the school, it's also in the community. If the community also upholds that high value, high regard to value, you know, then we will have a good supporting environment. But if the value is only practiced within the school, when children go out of school, it's not modeled out of school, then it's very artificial and it's a little bit more difficult for us to inculcate. But hopefully, if we can do that within our school community, and when children go beyond and they are able to carry out and demonstrate that, and also as they grow older and become part of the community, generations later, it will become part and parcel value of the community and society. I think that's what we want to do when we say inculcate it from the young, so that it can be brought beyond the school to the community as well. So I know that values is a little bit difficult among many teachers, because many would say that we need to focus on the syllabus and thus we can't focus on the values. But if we can integrate values as part of our teaching and learning process, I think it's more beneficial and impactful to our students, rather than learning, oh, this is on honesty, or honesty is like this. It's not a matter of saying it and then trying to pound into the head of children, but more of demonstrating and practicing, being able to practice it. So that's why in Japan, for instance, these values is not part and parcel of the teaching, but part and parcel of class management. How you manage the class and classes within the school, values is embedded in it, right? So I think that's my comment.
Thank you, Dato' Habibah. I think Fikri, you asked a very stinging question, something that we want to know, but then not sure how to go about asking. You're supposed to be the last person to ask question, but I saw another question in the chat function. This will be the last one. Kambaza. Kambaza, Dato', by the way, is from Nigeria. He's currently at Nigeria at the moment, having this class. So Kambaza, your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Habibah, for your wonderful presentation. My question, Doctor, is, I know you are talking about Malaysian, you are taking on Malaysian content, but my question, Doctor, is, when you are Deputy Director.
Yes.
Kambaza, are you still around?
I'm probably, yeah, are you with me? Are you hearing my voice?
Yeah, you were off for a little bit just now, so would it be possible for you to repeat your question?
Okay, what I say that how do you manage the system of education in private school and public school in achieving the quality standard of education in school? Because in my country, public school has more qualified teachers than private school. But in terms of the quality of education, students undergone through the private school, their education is more qualitative than the student in private school. Yeah, that is my question, Doctor.
Doria, can you repeat for me?
Just now, Kambaza was asking, in Nigeria, the context is there's a lot of good quality, teachers with good qualification in the public school. However, the quality is much better perceived at the private sector. Kambaza, is that the question that you're asking?
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? Your thoughts?
What I want to get from the doctor, how does they manage the system of education in order to have the consistency of education in private and public school? As I mentioned earlier, that private school, they have more qualified teachers than private school. But in terms of the education, quality of education given to the student in private school is more better than public school, despite the qualified teachers we have in the public school.
Okay. I think the situation may not be the same in Malaysia, because our teachers are all qualified in public as well as in private schools. But perhaps private schools in Malaysia varies. So there are more costly ones who can hire perhaps better qualified and use better teaching and learning approaches. And they may also value add the curriculum other than the national curriculum. So there's added value to the curriculum. So I guess certain parents who can afford, they may want to send their children there because of the added value. But then on the base of it, everyone goes through the standard curriculum, the national standard curriculum, right? So regardless whether you are in the public or private school, the difference, I guess, is because certain private schools can also provide not just the added curriculum, but also they may provide better facilities. But that's not the general case because our private curriculum varies as well. We also have religious private schools which may or may not have those added facilities and equipments, but they provide for a catchment of our communities that do want their children to follow religious education, for instance. So I think the context that we are talking about is slightly different. But one that is standard across the public and private is the curriculum. So the curriculum is standard. So what is delivered to the children should be standard across all. The other is the basis for the teachers. They must have at least a degree in order to teach this national curriculum in either the public as well as in the private school. So that's another factor that would contribute towards the quality either in public or private. Only, as I've said, the added value, if they can provide other curriculum or other aspects in the private sector, which is beyond the public school. But then certain public schools do also offer through co-curricular activities, other forms of activities that supporting the implementation of the curriculum as well. So that's also a form of added value in our public schools as well. The other perhaps is the difference between public and private is at the preschool level, where our preschool level are teachers who are graduates with early childhood background, whilst in the private, we do have really good private schools with qualified teachers, but there are also preschools without a minimum of diploma. So that's where we are struggling to make sure that our preschool providers do have a minimum of diploma in early childhood care and education. So I guess at the primary and secondary level, it's almost of equal, I would say, because of the bind of the curriculum, standard curriculum, and the quality of teachers. But at the preschool, is various because at the public schools, it's fully qualified, whilst at the private preschool, you do have qualified and you also have a mix where we have not made it compulsory, although we are moving towards making sure that all our providers have a minimum of diploma. So that we think would help, raise the standards across all. So I guess, it may be a simplified response to your question. I think the one that binds everything to make sure that there's quality to me is the curriculum and the assessment as well, because they do take our public examination. So they need to meet the standard there. So it's the curriculum and examination and the teachers that's required to teach the subjects. But there may be more to meet certain added value that they are providing to attract parents to send. The other is to meet certain needs of the community that wants their children to take certain added, curricula in those private schools.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Kambaza and Datuk Habibah. Originally, this class is supposed to be a 1-hour session, but we have exceeded 48 minutes of our session. Thank you so much, Dr. Habibah. There's a lot of input that you've given to us, especially through the Q&A session that was provided with the students. Prof. Yo actually requested that we organize another session. Yeah, I personally have,
Doria,
yeah.
your topic is so big.
Yeah, I think we should just narrow
And
down.
the questions are so tough.
But I'm very
these
proud of my
questions
students lah.
difficult to answer once.
Yeah, you guys ask very, very difficult questions. So thank you so much, Dato. With that, let me end the session for today. Thank you so much. If we are meeting face to face, I would have given you like key. Yeah.
No worries.
So thank you so much. I'm going to continue on with the rest of the class in a while. I will text you later just to personally thank you. You can choose to remain in the class to observe us, or you can take your leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So guys, thank